Good morning. This is Matt Sabourin de Choinière, State House candidate for Seabrook, New Hampshire, Rockingham District 30, with an advocacy brief on the impacts of the proposed Gulf of Maine offshore wind to our New Hampshire seacoast fishermen and the Gulf of Maine fisheries. Perhaps you've heard in the news about all of the beached dolphins and whales happening in New England on the eastern seaboard, and we're going to discuss why that might be happening. Give you the bottom line up front, discuss the offshore lease in the Gulf of Maine, its impact to fisheries and fishermen, and a call to action. For those who don't know, the Gulf of Maine is the North Atlantic Ocean that extends south from Cape Cod up to the Bay of Fundy and the tip of Maine in the north. Bottom line up front, there's been a proposed sale notice for 8 separate leases, totaling nearly 1 million acres, and a research lease in the Gulf of Maine with an auction scheduled for this fall. Bureau of Ocean Energy Management is the federal entity that is managing this auction and lease. The BOEM, that's what they're called in short, they're responsible for managing the development of the U.S. Outer Continental Shelf within the 200-mile exclusive economic zone. I encourage everyone watching this video to follow the links on this slide so they can see BOEM's perspective on how this project would proceed. This video is an advocacy brief, and it's built to bring attention to this issue and the consequences of it. This is a virtual meeting that was held last month. You can see that I'm in it in the top. Look at the bottom of the page. You can see that there's 26 participants. There's 15 million people in New England. This affects a lot of people, and there just isn't enough media exposure about this. And again, 8 leases totaling nearly 1 million acres, stationed between 50 to 100 miles offshore, so you wouldn't actually see them if you were on the shore, but you would certainly feel it in your wallet, as cabling from these wind farms to the shoreline costs about $10 million a mile. It's quite a bit. So what is a lease exactly? The lease opens up those plots of land to these companies on the right-hand side of the screen. Some of these are foreign-owned wind companies, and if you win a lease, you're bidding at least 50 cents an acre. It allows you to submit survey plans and a construction operations plan to BOEM for approval. So no construction is slated to start until the 2030s, but there still is a sense of urgency because the auction is proceeding. What's at risk with all of this? The Gulf of Maine food supply and ecosystem, commercial fishing skill set, and the livelihood of coastal communities. Windmills themselves will cause sediment plumes from their wind wakes, dousing the light required for phytoplankton to grow. Phytoplankton are the very root of the food chain. They live in the surface of the ocean, and they need sunlight. And having having sediment plumes douse their light is not good for the health of the ocean food chain. These images that you see are taken from the North Sea near England and Denmark, where wind farms are already in place. Additionally, the windmills generate alternating current power that needs to be converted to direct current power because they're over 30 miles away from the shore. There's cooling stations involved in this process for the conversion of AC to DC power to keep that power conversion process from overheating and continuous. It sucks water from the bottom of the ocean, cycles it through the machines at the top. 8.1 million gallons of water a day will be chlorinated in this process. And BOEM doesn't have conclusive evidence of how the temperature will change. If the heating element in the cooling stations that's involved in the electrical conversion, if the heating element will actually have an effect on the temperature of the water afterward. So there's a lot of consequences with this. Chlorination of water and a temperature change that we don't quite have the ability to measure. We also don't know what the mortality rate of any sort of entrained small animals that might get sucked up in these cooling station tubes. One of them is zooplankton. Again, zooplankton feed on the phytoplankton, so this is two levels of our ocean food chain that are at risk. Additionally, the cables and the windmills themselves generate electromagnetic frequencies, and this causes disruption in the orienting abilities and rate of and growth rates in many different types of crustaceans and fish. Pictured here on this slide are baby lobsters. We see a healthy baby lobster in the center. These images were taken from studies in Scotland that showed that exposed infant lobsters to EMFs to see what kinds of growth side effects would happen should offshore wind be developed in the ocean. We see this little baby lobster on the right. Don't just feel so bad for him. He's got an eye deformity. His eyes are all kind of blotchy and they're kind of blended together. And then this lobster at the top, he's got a puffy carapace, and lobsters need to be able to have vertical swimming abilities, and he might not be able to pass his vertical swim test because he's not shaped correctly. He needs lobsters, baby lobsters, and other kinds of fish need to be able to swim for the zooplankton that they eat. And that's basically we're taking the bottom two rungs of our ocean food chain out. What could the long-term consequences of that be? I don't know. Cool. The wind farm locations themselves are going to be disrupting the spawning grounds of redfish, white hake, and pollock, and as well as the migration patterns of forage fish and bluefin tuna in the Gulf of Maine. One of our oldest industries in the country, the cod fishing industry, is also at risk from this because the EMFs emitted by the windmills actually attract the codfish to cluster around them, so fishermen won't be able to fish for the codfish because it'll be in too close proximity to the wind farms. So looks like, so there's kind of a summary again. We have our ocean food chain, phytoplankton at the top, and then zooplankton and other small animals at the bottom. So, and then it goes down from there. So we don't know what the consequences are. The fishing industry is already the 7th most regulated industry in the country. I was at a deckhand at captain class of the New England Young Fishermen's Alliance a few weeks ago, and I was shocked to learn that New England fishermen used to be able to haul in 2 million pounds of seafood a year, and now it's just down to 60,000 pounds of seafood a year. I was really shocked by that level of regulations. And going back to the first slide, like what I was saying earlier about whales and dolphins popping up on the shore, well, that's because of the sonar mapping that is done by these wind survey vessels like you see in this picture. A wind survey vessel, so this photograph here was taken by a witness, and they're supposed to stop their sonar mapping when they come within 100 meters of a humpback whale. Well, the same individual that took this photograph, the large photograph, took the exact same photograph that you see in the foreground of this, the deceased humpback whale, shortly after that first one was taken. So if you're seeing whales and dolphins coming to shore, that's the reason why the sonar frequencies of the wind survey vessels interfere with their communications and orienting abilities, and it also affects their soft organs on the inside, giving them brain aneurysms. This is some data from NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's tallying of dead humpback whales starting from 2016. I know the wind surveying has been going on since. It's 2024 now. We've had 12 pass away this year. And again, so what does this mean with all of these wind farms that are going to be occurring in the Gulf of Maine? Keep in mind that they want to roll out the auction for all of these leases, 8 different wind farms. They want to roll out the auction at the exact same time as the research lease. Normally, what you do is you do the research first, and then you bring it to commercial. But that's not what's happening. We're doing it all at once. So there's drastic consequences for this happening. A 400-year skill set is in jeopardy. Over that time period, our commercial fishermen have developed essentially like muscle memory. They're able to just know where the fish are and get there. And with all of these wind farms being put out in the middle of the Gulf of Maine, all of the fish are going to have to change their migration patterns, and then the fishermen are going to have to spend time finding them. With the effects of EMF and the sediment plumes, and then even the cooling stations chlorinating the water, we don't know exactly how that's going to affect the life cycles of all of the sea creatures in the Gulf of Maine. We don't know, how it's going to affect the vitality of the fishing stocks. So less fish in the Gulf of Maine, less work, less areas to fish in the Gulf of Maine means that our fishermen's lives are going to have to be rearranged. Whether it's, let's say they would normally go out on a day trip, but because the distance from shore is too, that they would have a day trip to go fish, they have to actually travel farther into the Gulf of Maine and maybe plan an extended trip, having less time away from their families. Um, there's and not to forget that these coastal communities that they come from rely on the industry. Let's say the maintainers that are on the ground, the logisticians who manage the traps, the folks who paint the fishing vessels, all that industry that exists on the shore that comes into the government we're swapping a reliable food source with an unreliable energy source. The windmills are 30 to 50% efficient, and we're going to see the effects on the logistics chain all over New England should this proceed. And again, the BOEM's doing its courtesy, checking the box to get people to come out so they can say that they've done a good job informing the public. This is a public meeting that was held on May 29th. This photo at the bottom. BOEM did not come to film their meeting. The federal government came to give a presentation about one of its projects in public, and they themselves did not film the meeting. The meeting was filmed by an attendee, actually. A great New Hampshire patriot, Chow Kelly, took care of that. They expressed desire to have us break into stations, so that way they couldn't really give a transparent presentation. But thankfully, though, because of the enthusiasm of the audience that night, the plenary brief and the question and answer lasted the entire 2 hours, so they could give a transparent presentation, and uh, our fishermen who were there present were able to make their voices heard that night. They did leave with an understanding that this is not the desire of New Hampshire seacoast residents or New England fisheries and fishermen. So here's a timeline on this. We're in the red box. We're approaching the end of the red box on the right, the leasing process, and then we move into site assessment phase. Site assessment doesn't begin until a lease is awarded, and site assessment is only for recreation and planning. Again, no construction for about 5 years from now. We're not expecting anything to be built into the 2030s. And then in the orange field, you see when the construction operations plan has been submitted to BOEM. That's when there's a state and local permitting process, so there is an opportunity to deny in the state and local level at that case, but I think we need to move things along with trying to stop this a little bit sooner. We could try, maybe local ordinances banning electrical cables from the ocean all along the New England coast. That's an idea. We could even turn on Station 2 at NextEra in Seabrook. That's another idea, because then that could reduce the demand for offshore wind energy coming from the ocean. And again, like I mentioned, the denial of permits in the permitting process. Can this be stopped? Has it been stopped already? There was an offshore wind project in New York that ended up being canceled due to disputes within negotiating parties of the contract. It wasn't grassroots resistance, but it was something. But the biggest game changer so far was last week's ruling on Chevron, and the regulatory state is taking a knife through the federal regulatory state. So I think there's some ample opportunity to rally around the freedom that this creates, and we'll see what opportunities come from that. Right now, there's a call to action for their draft environmental assessment that just came out a few weeks ago. There's a public comment period that expires on July 22nd of this year. I encourage you to follow the link at the top and to submit public comments expressing your frustration. And there's also next week on July 8th and July 10th public hearings, virtual hearings. Please register so you can at least get your verbal comments, so the BOEM team can hear what you have to say about this. For further support, we encourage everyone to sign the New England Fishermen's Stewardship Association petition or join NEFSA. They were founded last year. They're the leading advocacy group for New England fishermen. You can check out the New England Young Fishermen's Alliance as well. They're dedicated to creating new captains to keep a stock of trained fishing experts in New England, to keep this skill set alive. There's also Yankee Co-op here in Seabrook, or you can go, if you have any questions further, you can sign the change.org petition, join the New England Offshore Wind Facebook group. We got to get organized because we got to stop this. I want to bring this issue to the New Hampshire State House and try and figure out how we can end this project. The primary September 10th this year. I want to stand up for our Seabrook commercial fishermen and find a way to get this Gulf project stopped. So that concludes my briefing. There's my sources. Hope everyone has a great day, and let's stop offshore wind. Thank you.